and then I'll jump back on and confirm once it's confirmed that it's going live.
Okay.
Commissioner Chavez, we're live now.
Okay. Thank you. All right. Good afternoon, everybody. Good afternoon, commissioners. We will call this Caddo Parish special meeting to session. It is July the 14th at 1 p.m. Mr. Everson, roll call vote, please.
Mr. Hopkins.
Present.
Mr. Johnson.
Present.
Mr. Jackson. Mr. Young.
Present.
Mr. Burrell. Mr. Carthorne. Saw him on there. Commissioner Cawthorn, are you there?
Present.
Thank you. Commissioner Gage Watt.
Present.
Commissioner Taliaferro.
Here, sir.
Commissioner Atkins.
Here.
Commissioner Chavez.
Here, sir.
Commissioner Lazarus. And Commissioner Epperson.
Present.
All right, you do have a quorum. You have 3 members absent and 9 members present.
Thank you, Mr. Everson. Commissioners, we will have our invocation by Commissioner Taliaferro, followed by our Pledge of Allegiance performed by Commissioner Epperson.
Let us pray. Heavenly Father, Lord Jesus, we come to you with heavy hearts as sinners needing your forgiveness for our many sins against you and our fellow man. Be with us today as we do the work of the people. And Lord, help us to do the right thing for the right reason so we can take care of our constituents. Lord, bless those who cannot be with us today. Bless those who are suffering from the coronavirus, both in hospitals and resting at home. We ask your many blessings upon this meeting and all those in attendance. In your name we pray. Amen.
Amen.
Let us all stand and repeat the Pledge of Allegiance in unison. I would ask that all military and veterans render the standard hand to proud salute. All others, hand across your heart. I pledge allegiance
To the flag
to the States of America and to the republic
for which
it
it
stands,
stands,
one nation, under God,
indivisible, with liberty
and justice for all. Thank you.
Thank you, commissioners. Mr. Everson, we move on to citizens' comments.
Thank you. No, we have not received any direct citizens comments. I did have some commissioners forwarded me some messages that citizens have sent in. I don't know if the intent was for those to be citizens' comments or if they are to be shared with the rest of the commission. But there were some
Mr.
comments.
Everson? Mr. Everson?
Yes.
Those that was forwarded to me, I saw they was forwarded to Dr. Wilson, Ms. Bryan, and Ms. Frazier. However, they excluded you from it, so they are probably intended for public comments. That's why I forwarded them to you.
Thank you very much. And I printed them out thinking that I think maybe they may have just not had my new email address. So I have those prepared to read at this time.
Yes, sir. Thank you.
First one comes from Ms. Brika Peoples and reads, quite so often when we turn on our TV or when we look on social media, we see police brutality start to look the new norm. From Anthony Child's Mother's Day brawl to Tommy McLaughlin, we see firsthand how it can easily happen in our own backyard. This is why our citizens don't trust the police. Our citizens deserve to be safe by the very same ones who took an oath to serve and protect. In order to regain trust, the officers must have honesty, transparency, along with integrity. 3 months ago, I was driving through District A and saw Officer Jackson with their assault rifles intimidated the community. I asked Jackson what was his reason to have that out in front of the children. He couldn't answer. Some of the rookies don't understand good policing because they were trained to be bullies. I know what good police is because I was raised by two of the best officers at SPD. What I'm starting to see in the past 18 months is horrible. We need an outside investigation before any police reform to make it better. And that concludes the comments from Ms. Brika Peoples. The next comments come from, the next comments are, this comment is very long, so we probably will not reach the end of it before the 3 minutes. But Michelle, could you let me know when 3 minutes starts, when I start reading this? Okay, members of the Caddo Parish Commission and the Parish Attorney's Office. My name is Tiffany Sanchez. I'm addressing you today via letter to give my account of how the Confederate monument located on the Caddo Courthouse grounds has affected my family in recent weeks. First, I'd like to share some background information as to why I feel inclined to write this letter. I was born into a low-income and undereducated family. My father dropped out of high school to provide for his pregnant teen girlfriend and spent his career as a mechanic who struggled with alcoholism, addiction, legal issues, domestic violence, and a string of 5 marriages and 4 children. My mother struggled as a single mother working at Libby Glass and later marrying a local pastor, former Marine, and business owner who would go on to abuse me physically, sexually, and emotionally. As a teen, I had attempted suicide in order to escape my environment and underwent mental health treatment that saved my life, but didn't solve my problems. Soon after, I would run away from home, and upon capture, I was sent to a Christian reform school in Corpus Christi, Texas, that I would later learn was a center of controversy over the legal obligation of the state to protect children from abuse and the constitutional rights of Christians to operate child care facilities without a state license. I moved in with my father at the age of 16. Throughout several months, I attended 4 high schools and lived in 6 households. The county assigned me a truancy officer, yet I only saw this person once. I was the victim of 2 rapes and multiple batteries. At the age of 16, I was held at gunpoint by a domestic partner and the police within a few months. Neither of them were due to my actions. Upon entering one high school, the principal met me at the door, stated my last name as a question, and asked, "We're not going to have any problems, are we?" I was homeless and without an education or a driver's license when I moved back to Shreveport with an abusive and mentally ill boyfriend, where I began working in multiple local venues and exotic dancing at the age of 18. When I was beaten by my boyfriend on one occasion, I called the local police and asked for resources since I was now of legal age to assist me in escaping the situation and pursuing a better life. I was told to save my money until I could find an apartment and leave him. I approached 2 other police officers downtown one night and asked again, what can I do? They told me that I was obviously not ready to leave him, or I would have already. Eventually, the bikers and criminals to which I had been exposed became involved and not only provided a safe space for me, but also made a clear presence in my boyfriend's life that led to his leaving the state and my never seeing him again. Over the years, I married one of these men, had a child, received my GED, and attended BIPSI to compensate for my lack of education as a child. I spent years in therapy to recover from the abuse, neglect, and trauma I experienced, and have become an advocate for cult survivors, runaways, victims of domestic violence, drug addiction, spiritual abuse, and sexual assault. I have spent countless hours teaching individuals how trauma affects the brain and body in order to give them more control over their lives. I have helped teens talk with their parents about the abuse they experience, because the state will not intervene unless bruises are present or a hospital visit is experienced. I've opened my home to individuals so they can have a few weeks or months of stability to start a new life. I do this because the resources available are either overextended, non-existent, or are abusive or negligent themselves and have lost the trust of those that need them. I cannot count how many times I have sat with a mother who is crying, but they cannot call the police on an abusive. And I'm sorry, we have reached the 3 minutes at this point. Does anybody want to allow additional time?
Are we halfway through it?
Move to extend.
Yeah, I second that.
We're not. It does have. It is quite lengthy. And I will continue reading it. I'll also send everybody a copy of these. Let's see. I cannot count how many times I've sat with a mother who is crying because they cannot call the police on an abusive spouse. They know that if they do, it will actually make the situation worse. This has been a national issue for longer than I have been alive, and I can't claim to have a solution for the problems of a broken system. I can, however, give the most recent account of when a system has yet again failed me. On June 13th, I held my first session of what I called a speaker's corner. According to the event page on Facebook, it was created to maintain peaceful dialogue between citizens, artists, and community leaders. Profanity and threat of violence are strictly prohibited. The first session was slow and consisted of several people reading the Constitution together while discussing it. The second session, Saturday, June 20th, had more people in attendance. I noticed an individual across the street recording us while he leaned against his truck. His name was Rex Dukes, a well-known local Confederate enthusiast and demonstrator. I saw an opportunity for meaningful dialogue and a potential progress in healing the division in our city over the Confederate monument. A local high school civics teacher and I approached Mr. Dukes and requested he join us for a conversation about his views. We informed him that we welcome everyone's views and wished to hear everything he had to say. Upon his denial of our invitation, we again informed him that the Speaker's Corner would be available at the same time every weekend should he change his mind. Later that day, he misunderstood an art demonstration performed during the permitted event. Due to his misunderstanding, Mr. Dukes made a phone call to several members of the Sons of Confederate Veterans, who then showed up to protect the monument. I and several others continue to peacefully engage in dialogue with the people who arrived under the false assertion that we were intending to harm the Confederate monument. We were surprised when multiple men arrived on the scene in an armed response to the calls they received from Mr. Dukes. At the end of the event, two members of the Sons of Confederate Veterans claimed to have a better understanding of what our event was and our intentions of creating a peaceful, meaningful, and needed dialogue in our community. Over the course of the following week, Rex Dukes, with the help of the Gulf Coast Patriot Network, an organization he founded, made a call to action against our event to every Patriot militia, motorcycle club, and Sons of Confederate Veterans member in the South. He referred to us as racist, snotty-nosed kids, and old expletive baggy. That is all words I can't say on in public company. Who were socialist Marxist zombies and needed an apocalyptic warning to leave the statue alone. He stated in the address that he had credible evidence we intended to establish an autonomous zone, topple the statue, and riot in downtown Shreveport. This call to action was met by individuals who have organized groups and travel around the country to agitate protesters to violence. When I arrived around 11:30 a.m. to set up for our noon event, I was met by 5 people surrounding the statue, calling me names and referencing. Okay, that's our second 3 minutes. Would y'all like to extend the time?
Just for a point of clarification, Mr. Everson, give me a rough estimate. Are you more than halfway, 75%?
I'm 2 pages in, and it's 4.5 pages.
Is Mr. President, is there a call to action here for us, or
I think it's Miss Sanchez has given us a personal account of her experience. I would welcome any motions, though. We've expired our second motion made by Commissioner Johnson.
I move to extend to read the entire document.
second?
All right.
I'll continue. Thank y'all. Let's see. I'll back up just a little bit. She says, when I arrived around 11:30 a.m. to set up for our
I want to object.
Okay.
5 people surrounding.
Mr. Everson, we have to take a vote on this. I'm sorry, guys.
I'm sorry.
We're going to roll call vote on the motion for Vice President Johnson, second by Commissioner Taliaferro, to extend the time indefinitely to allow Mr. Everson to read the entirety of Ms. Sanchez's letter. Roll call vote, please.
Mr. Hopkins,
No.
Mr. Johnson,
Yes.
Mr. Jackson,
No.
Mr. Young,
Yes.
Mr. Burrell,
Yes.
Mr. Cawthorn,
Yes.
Miss Gage Watts,
Yes.
Mr. Taliaferro,
Yes.
Mr. Atkins,
Yes.
Mr. Chavez,
Yes.
Mr. Lazarus,
Yes.
and Mr. Epperson.
Yes.
Okay, that motion passes with 10 in support and 2 in opposition. And I will continue. Apologize, I was so into the letter, I kept just had to keep reading. I'll back up just a little bit. So when I arrived around 11:30 a.m. to set up for our noon event, I was met by 5 people surrounding the statue, calling me names and referencing to the large amount of firearms across the street. Will James, the organizer of the event, immediately called the police. While trying to set up and observe our prayer ceremony before we began the speaker's corner session, my 15-year-old son and I were constantly having armed individuals approach us with threats of violence, calling us all manner of vulgarities, and emasculating my son. They stated our presence on the sidewalk in front of the courthouse was permission for them to engage in this behavior. While I tried to explain the misunderstandings of the situation, the police officer on scene watched as an armed man and woman screamed threats of violence at me and my son. The armed man, Kevin Brown, physically pushed me while I was standing with my hands folded in front of my body calmly, telling the woman threatening me that I understood that she was coming from a place of pain and I respect her right to be heard. When Mr. Brown pushed me, I called out to the police officer. He said I should just walk away, and the officers on the scene continued to allow these acts of intimidation, humiliation, threats, and violence to occur on the public space of the sidewalk at 501 Texas Street. As the next few hours progressed, a few dozen people arrived to attend our scheduled event. When met with acts of lewd and violent behavior, the attendees also responded with gentle invitations to calmly have a discussion about the perceived intentions of this event and why they felt the way they did. Multiple people approached the Shreveport police officers requesting an explanation of when they would intervene and preserve the peacefulness of this event. All of us were told that they would not deny someone's freedom of speech when we explained that we were asking for them to keep people away from breaking the law, and we were concerned about the safety of the individuals attending. We were met with shrugs and indecisive double talk. We began live streaming the event on Facebook as our last means of protecting our life and possibly legacy should things become even more escalated. When the community of Shreveport saw the way police allowed these criminal acts against unarmed women and children, private citizens arrived to open carry and acted as a deterrent from further violence. It's my belief that the actions of those citizens saved the lives of my son and I, as the police were charged with a task they did not fulfill. I cannot speak for anyone who attended the event other than my son and I. What I am about to state, I mean with all sincerity and with the weight of my past that I shared with you at the beginning of this letter. The past 2 weeks, my son and I have alternated between sleepless nights and nights plagued by the dreams of holding each other as one of us died by a gunshot wound inflicted by the people Rex Dukes brought to Shreveport. We have moments of stillness that are interrupted by sudden tears and panic because we know that anyone who viewed the live streams of the people he brought might recognize us and may kill us in a parking lot, follow us home, or terrorize us the way they did downtown. I have conversations with my son who's planning on joining the fire academy when he comes of age, in which he explains that he was prepared to die that day in order to protect me from them. Going to the grocery store is an overstimulating experience of expecting to see the faces of the people who were ready to kill us a few days before and the police who refused to protect us. My body is exhausted and in pain. My time has been dedicated to gathering footage from the event in order to secure prosecution for these crimes committed that day and trying to console my son, who for the first time has no interest in attending a fireworks display on the 4th of July. He told me they sound too much like gunfire. I spent hours on my Facebook live stream video responding respectfully to the comments of people supporting those who attacked us, again pushing the mission to peacefully engage in dialogue. This meant apologizing for an emotional plea I made with the Sons of Confederate Veterans present that day. I begged them to intervene and denounce the actions of agitators. I had hoped it would get them to stop and, in all sincerity, save our life that day. Even when they did approach our microphone and denounce their actions, the agitators continued. I attempted again after the event to request members of the Sons of Confederate Veterans, an organization from which my father had a pedigree and my son would be a rightful member should he apply, meet with me to form a statement condemning the actions of the outside agitators that day. These requests were met with threats of legal action being taken against me for slander. On July 4th, I arrived at the police station to file my report. I had taken a full week to gather the video evidence I felt was necessary to prove the crimes that had taken place, as well as evidence for the others who had experienced batteries the same day. I contacted Officer Wilhite, who alerted the desk sergeant that I would be arriving. When I introduced myself, he called an officer to take my report, and while we waited, proceeded to question why I was there and what I was protesting. He then began cursing and shoving paperwork around the desk because, as he stated, I'm not even supposed to be at a desk. I'm supposed to be on patrol. Thankfully, my husband was present with me during all of this, as I had a panic attack in the station while trying to make a report. When the officer taking my report arrived, he listened to my report sympathetically, but made several statements about how these individuals knew the law and most of the charges wouldn't hold up in court. He never offered for me to give a statement, and I later learned from the investigator that many of the crimes I reported were not included in the officer's report. I had asked several times for someone with the police department to go over the footage with me so I could know what I can press charges against. No one has. Yesterday, I received an email from the investigator on my case stating our appointment to review footage on the 14th was no longer necessary. As an advocate and survivor, I understand the system is broken and no one individual can repair the overwhelming gaps in our public services. I also understand that we have to start somewhere. The removal of the monument was never my goal. I didn't fully understand why it was such an important task until June 27th, 2020. That was the day that will permanently impact the life of my son and myself. We sought understanding and to provide healing in our community, but we were met with violence and abandonment. The fact that the statue was the focus of the conflict crippled the police from taking action against armed individuals from outside the city, bringing threats of violence and against the peaceful citizens of your community. If any of the patrons downtown Shreveport had done the same, we would have been arrested outside a restaurant or bar on site. June 27th was the day I learned that the Confederate statue located on the Caddo courthouse grounds was a definite inhibitor of equal justice for the citizens of Caddo Parish, regardless of race, religion, or gender. And that concludes her comments.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes, sir. Commissioner Burrell.
I guess I can apologize for the lady for the lengthy report. But at the same time, I was out of town when this was happening. I just happened to see it on Facebook. Didn't know what the situation was around it, but my ex-daughter-in-law was there and she tried to explain it to me. So this was more in detail. So I appreciate the information, because sometimes we don't realize a lot of times, how this traumatized people. I sat on the Criminal Justice Committee for 12 years, and some of the stuff that came before us, I could not take. I had to leave because it was just too emotional. But sometimes people don't listen to it because they don't want to listen to it, and the reason why we don't resolve issues because it never gets to them where it hurts. So I appreciate the young lady, whomever it is, telling her story, because she corroborated some of the things that I did here. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Commissioner Burrell.
I do have 3 more comments that were submitted. They were submitted anonymously, however.
Okay. Hang tight 1 second, Mr. Everson. I just want to give just a decorum on. We're not supposed to speak under citizens' comments. Commissioner Watts, I did see your hand though, so if you did have like a point of clarification, I wanted to address that.
I was just going to make a motion to move the remaining comments to the end of the meeting.
Okay.
Second.
All right.
We do have a caller on the line. Would you like to let that caller that's on the phone speak first?
Yes.
I think we should respect that.
Yes.
Citizens, allow them to speak. Okay. Thank you, Stormy. We'll take the call, Mr. Everson, and then we'll get back to Stormy's motion.
Thank you. Deputy Nations, could you connect our caller, please?
Dr. James, are you still there? Okay. Okay, I'm going to put you on speaker. State your name and you have 3 minutes for your comment, okay? You're welcome. Hold on one second. Okay, you can go ahead with your comment.
Yes, this is Dr. Will James, address of 407 Louisiana Avenue, Shreveport, Louisiana, 71101. Thank you all for the time for me to speak today. I just wanted to make a short statement. I'm actually the lead organizer for the peaceful demonstrations that have been occurring at the courthouse, not just for the past couple of months, but for several years myself. I recognize all the work that everyone before me has done, and I also recognize the work that everyone is doing up to today. I wanted to speak on the fact that with the events that occurred on the 27th of June, where we had a peaceful demonstration, and I do respect everyone's right to bear arms, but when you're bearing arms and standing over peaceful protesters, cursing at them, calling them derogatory terms, using racial slurs, and then also shoving, pushing, test checking, and so on and so forth with peaceful protesters. I'm concerned not just with those moments that happened. I was concerned, and it has been raised already with the police chief, but I feel more needs to be done. Because with the fact that we had officers, certain sergeants and lieutenants that were standing idly by while people were being shoved and pushed and being threatened. We had a young man, a 15-year-old, who was told that he needed to stay down on the ground or they were going to knock him back down, and that's putting it politely. Not to mention with the verbal threats and the minimal physical contact that happened, but also I'm sure the council and the parish is aware of the threats that were made through online live videos. And with these threats of snipers that would be not just in adjacent buildings, but also in the courthouse. I'm really concerned about the safety, not just of any protesters that may come to attend, whether you're a protester or a counter protester. I'm more concerned about passersby that have nothing to do with the monument. If you have a grandma or grandpa that are playing Pokemon Go, someone drops a pistol, the weapon is not on safety, and a round goes off and takes out grandma or grandpa or grandchild. I feel something needs to be done to expedite either the removal of the monument or, least case scenario, to cover it up. That way, we can see that some kind of action is being done, that the people's voices are being heard, and to prevent anything terrible from happening as far as the physical nature. The protesters are innocent citizens that are in the area. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you, sir.
You're well, Linda.
That was our only comment.
Thank you very much.
Nations, commissioners, we,
Mr. Chavez.
go ahead, Stormy, and then Commissioner Atkins.
No, I'm not on the board for that.
Okay.
We vote on motion, right?
Yes, sir.
Well, this is
we're in the middle of,
this is a parliamentary issue. You know, if and I have no idea what these anonymous comments are, but I'll ask Ms. Frazier to rule on whether the commission hears items that are submitted anonymously or not.
I don't think so.
Ms. Frazier, can you comment on that?
Commissioner, that would be up to you all. You don't have a provision for that in your bylaws, and I'm not aware of one in Robert's rules. What I would suggest, since they were submitted by a commissioner anonymously, that they at least be made part of the record of this meeting, so that there's a record that they were brought to your attention and made part of the record of the minutes.
So moved. So moves, Chairman.
okay, I was waiting for a second.
Well, it dies if it doesn't have one.
Right. Okay, so that dies. We move back to the original motion by Stormy, hearing them at the end of the meeting. And I have the second by, I believe it was Commissioner Taliaferro. Mr. Everson, roll call vote, please.
Mr. Hopkins,
Yes.
Mr. Johnson,
Yes.
Mr. Jackson,
Yes.
Mr. Young,
Yes.
Mr. Burrell,
Yes.
Mr. Cawthorn,
Yes.
Mrs. Gage Watts,
Yes.
Mr. Taliaferro,
Yes.
Mr. Atkins,
Yes.
Mr. Chavez,
Yes.
Mr. Lazarus, and Mr. Epperson.
Yes.
Yes.
That
Yeah.
motion passes unanimously with 12 in support and none in opposition. And that brings us to new business. First item of under new business is just your certificate of teleconference that's been attached, and we can call your attention to that. No action is necessary. That brings us to the second item, discussion or action relative to public safety at the Caddo Parish Courthouse and within the 500 block of Texas Street.
Commissioner Johnson, did you want to make a motion on this?
I'm on the board.
Oh, I'm sorry, Commissioner Watts, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. President. I'd like to make a motion to have the administrator erect a protective barrier around the Confederate monument in the interest of public safety and protect against vandalism. If I can get a second, I'll speak on this motion.
I'll second that.
Thank you. Commissioners, in response to public safety, the recent protests surrounding the Confederate monument at Caddo Parish Courthouse, even during this pandemic, Shreveport is at the center of a controversial issue that was closed 3 years ago. Therefore, this motion is to build an undisputed parish land, a four-sided wood structure sheathed in plywood to make a box around the monument to reduce tensions among protesters and protect the sculptures from accidental or even intentional damage. The box could be 16 to 20 feet tall, though that wouldn't completely conceal the statue on the very top. It would protect and cover most of the structure. For a more attractive appeal, the plywood should be painted either white or blue and have affixed to each of its four sides a flag made of self-adhering vinyl. One recommended producer is already recommended. The flags should be large enough to cover the wood, perhaps the size of 2 to 4 sheets of plywood, which are 4 by 8. The north side, facing Texas Street, should be the flag of the United States of America. The south, facing Courthouse, the state flag of Louisiana. To the east, the flag of the city of Shreveport, and to the west, the flag of the parish of Caddo. This is my motion. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Watts. I do agree with you. In light of recent events with the protest, I think building a structure to protect the monument, it's no surprise that it's still stuck in court. And we've had a lot of other monuments around the country that have been demolished, spray painted. Even our own has had paint thrown on it. And I think this is one of the bipartisan issues where we could come together in the middle, because there is people that are offended by it and simultaneously protecting it. I think we could achieve a successful resolution for everybody on all sides by accomplishing this and protecting it until we can figure out where it will be moved. So thank you for this, Stormy, and for those flags. I love that idea as well. I really do. So thank you for that. Commissioner Jackson, I see you on the board.
I'm just making sure that this is not going to stop it from being removed.
Not that I know of, Commissioner. I think the course has been set, and we are waiting until the judge rules his verdict. But until that point, I think this is a great concession to protect the monument, as well as achieve the issue of a lot of people that bear witness to it as offenders. This, I think,
I see Attorney Frazier just got off mute.
Oh, I'm just waiting. I don't have anything to add.
Well, I guess I'm asking.
Hey, Commissioner Jackson.
I heard. Yeah.
Yes, sir. We have pretty clear directions from you all to move the statue.
Okay. Okay.
Okay, thank you, Commissioner Jackson. I have Commissioner Cawthorn and then Vice President Johnson.
Yes, can Dr. Wilson repeat what he just said?
Sir, what I said was we have clear directions from the board to get the statue moved at the appropriate time and to do the process involved in getting it moved.
Okay. My initial question was, as it relates to the box structure, how soon are we going to put that up from the originator of the motion?
That'd be a Dr.
Commissioner
Wilson.
Watts, did you have a time frame?
I would love to see that box up by this Friday.
Okay. All right. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Commissioner Cawthorn. Commissioner Johnson,
Call for the question.
the chair seconds.
Second,
All right.
second,
Mr. Everson, roll call vote, please.
Commissioner Hopkins,
Yes.
Commissioner Johnson.
Yes.
Okay. Commissioner Jackson,
I'm a yes if it
Commissioner-
being up by Friday is part of the stipulation.
I thought this was called for the
Calling
question.
for the question.
Oh, yeah.
Commissioner Young,
Yes.
Commissioner Burrell,
yes,
Commissioner Cawthorn,
Yes.
Commissioner Gage Watts,
Yes.
Commissioner Taliaferro,
Yes.
Commissioner Atkins,
Yes.
Commissioner Chavez,
Yes.
Commissioner Lazarus,
Yes.
and Commissioner Epperson.
yes,
Okay, that called for the question. The question is called for. That was a unanimous passage with 12 in support and none in opposition. That brings us back to our motion from Commissioner Gage Watts. And for clarity, could somebody confirm that second was Commissioner Chavez?
Yes, sir.
Okay. So we're back to the motion that Commissioner Gage Watts made for the administrator to erect a temporary barrier around the mayor.
By this
By
Friday.
Friday, right?
by
Friday,
Friday.
right?
Yes.
Okay.
Got it. I just want to make sure I didn't miss any aspect of that. Thank y'all. So we are ready for a roll call.
Yes.
Yes,
Commissioner Hopkins,
No.
Commissioner Johnson,
Yes.
Commissioner Jackson,
Yes.
Commissioner Young,
Yes.
Commissioner Burrell,
yes,
Commissioner Cawthorn,
Yes.
Commissioner Gage Watts,
Yes.
Commissioner Taliaferro.
Yes, just one quick clarification. We are voting on the box, correct?
Yes, sir.
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, Commissioner Atkins,
Yes.
Commissioner Chavez,
Yes.
Commissioner Lazarus. I couldn't hear it if you.
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Commissioner Epperson.
yes,
Okay, that motion passes with 11 in support and 1 in opposition. And that brings us to the next item on the agenda is amending ordinance number 59.
Move to adopt.
Second.
second,
All right, got a motion to adopt in a second. Was that Commissioner Jackson that made that motion?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Commissioner Jackson,
Who was the second?
Epperson,
Thank you.
Commissioner Jackson, did you want to speak on that motion?
I don't think so.
Okay. I have Commissioner Johnson and Taliaferro on the board. Did you guys want to speak on this motion?
No,
Or is
I
this
was on
just-
for the last one.
Okay. Commissioner Taliaferro,
Yeah,
is that hangover from last one? Okay.
It is, but
Allison?
if you would just, yes, sir, it was from the last one, but if I could get clarification on exactly what we're voting on this time, please.
Yes, this is the amendment to ordinance 5962 that we passed.
I understand. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank
Thank
you,
you.
Commissioner Taliaferro. Dr. Wilson, I also saw you on the board, but then you got back off. I didn't know if you wanted to add something.
Not to this particular issue, sir. I'd like to speak to the last issue before we adjourn the meeting.
Yes, sir. I'll call on you after this. Commissioner Atkins, go ahead. You have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. President. I just want to point out, although I'm not necessarily in favor of the original amendment 5962, I do view this as an improvement to that original ordinance. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Commissioner Atkins. I see no other commissioners. Mr. Everson, roll call vote, please.
Commissioner Hopkins,
No.
Commissioner Johnson,
Yes.
Commissioner Jackson, Commissioner Jackson, I didn't hear you if you responded.
Yeah, you muted.
I got it then.
Yeah.
Okay. Commissioner Young,
Yes.
Commissioner Burrell,
Yes.
Commissioner Cawthorn,
Yes.
Commissioner Gage Watts,
Yes.
Commissioner Taliaferro,
Yes.
Commissioner Atkins,
Yes.
Commissioner Chavez,
Yes.
Commissioner Lazarus,
Yes.
and Commissioner Epperson.
Yes.
That amendment is adopted with 11 in support and 1 in opposition.
Thank you, Mr. Everson. Dr. Wilson, I have you on the board to speak next.
Thank you, Commissioner Chavez. Hey, Commissioners, I understand the details of the last measure y'all just voted on regarding the erection of a box around the monument. I just want you to be aware that we will expeditiously move to have the box erected, but the artistry work with all the flags and the detail may take a little bit longer to achieve other than Friday.
Dr. Wilson, I have a company that we currently use that are able
Okay.
to have them ready by Friday.
Okay, would you?
Most important thing is the box up.
Yes, sir. I have the information for you. I'll send it.
Yes, ma'am. I appreciate it, Commissioner Gage Watts.
Saturday
Thank you, sir.
morning is good too.
Okay.
Yeah, most
Saturday
important
morning
thing
is
is
good,
having the box up and
Yes, sir.
the
Before
accessories
they
can
get
come
back
later.
downtown. Yes.
Thank you, Dr. Wilson.
Thank you, sir.
Have the guys erecting that
Hey,
box be safe. It's
Mr.
pretty hot out
President.
there. I got
Mr.
Commissioner Taliaferro on the
Mr.
board
President.
still. Yes, sir, Commissioner Epperson.
Am I next?
Let me get Commissioner Taliaferro, then I have you right after him.
Okay.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. President. The only thing I wanted to suggest is I understand that we want this up as soon as possible, but I guess my concern is that I want it to be as aesthetic as possible, professionally as possible. I understand from Commissioner Johnson that, understand the box is the most important thing to protect the monument, but obviously the artwork is, I think, just as important. And I just want it done, as best we can do if we're going to do it. And I understand that Commissioner Gage Watts has taken great pains probably to ensure that that will happen.
Well, I was just basically saying that we weren't going to wait for the flags to come in before we started erecting the box. The box can go ahead and start being erected and the flags can come in. That's what I was saying.
And Mr. President, to comment on the Commissioner Johnson, I think that it's incumbent upon us to actually make sure that all of our constituents know exactly what we're going to be doing. And if possible, maybe we could actually send out through a press release the artist's rendition of what it's going to look like, so people are not, left in the lurch on, exactly what's going on. Because I know as soon as you put a box around it, people are going to think it's going to be moved, and then we're all fielding a variety of questions and the confusion sets in. Just a thought.
Thank
Well,
you,
it is gonna be
Commissioner
moved.
Dr. Wilson, that being said, can you ask Crystal to put out a press conference just to advise what happened today so that the public knows what's going on?
Press release, correction.
Yes, sir.
Thank you,
Press
Commissioner
release.
Burrell.
Yes, sir.
Commissioner Epperson, you have the floor.
Hopefully our media is astute and watching what we are doing today and give an accurate and an articulate and a descriptive presentation on their newscast as to what has transpired here today. In addition to that, on the motion relative to amending the mask ordinance, I'd just like to bring to your attention that the Marine base in Okinawa, which have over 4,100 Marine personnel, has been on lockdown because of a significant amount of COVID-19 infections at that particular base. They are now in contention with the town of Okinawa. Also bearing in mind the U.S. Theodore Roosevelt has docked at San Diego, which had over 1,500 of our sailors, where they had to take that vessel out of action based upon COVID-19. Also, there's over 10,000 that we know of. Of course, we aren't going to publicize how this is affecting our military, but worldwide, there are 10,000 that has been released by the Pentagon of our military personnel that's affected. And right across the river at Barksdale Air Force Base, for those of us that figure that it's an inconvenience or an infringement upon their rights, just remember when you go into these places where there are airmen and personnel, military personnel from Barksdale, that you might infect, which will affect the defense and the security of our nation. Please don't continue to be that selfish. Thank you.
Thanks, Commissioner Everson. Commissioners, I see no one else on the board. We have
Hey, Mario.
Yes, sir, Commissioner Jackson.
Yeah, I was just going to tell Dr. Wilson, I am mindful of this heat that we're working in, and that if we could, I know that state workers, when they have those state contracts doing roads and stuff, they're mindful of that heat. So if we have to adjust those hours to get it done at night, I know a lot of times they'll bring them in at night when it's cooled off, turn the big lights on up above and let them get it done. So let's just be mindful of the heat and putting those workers out in this heat. I know we want to get it done, but let's make sure we get it done with that safety in mind.
Yes, sir. I'm also mindful of the security aspect as well.
Oh yeah, that too. Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Appreciate you.
Okay. Well said. Thanks, Commissioner Jackson.
Thanks.
Commissioner Burrell.
Mr. President, at what point will we get into the this, I guess, any discussion on the mass ordinance that we passed, or that we are amending also? Because I wanted to make a comment on that.
You have the floor right now, Commissioner Burrell, and then after that, we're going to go into executive session.
Okay. Well, I just wanted to say, for the benefit of the commission, my fellow commissioners, I was very disturbed from a phone call that I received last night from a friend who used to own a restaurant here, who has gone on and to the corporate sector of oil and gas. And he called me concerned about the mass situation here, where it's my understanding, and I've gotten it off of Facebook now too, from different ones, that we do have state legislators, one of our state legislators, who seem to be opposed to the mask ordinance that the mayor had put forth, and the governor now, mandatory mask ordinance, where they're actually going in and trying to influence hospitals where healthcare workers are working, and pretty much intimidating them, getting the hospital to possibly do an investigation on those individuals, because they are coming out supporting the mandatory mask situation, because they work in that area, and they're seeing how the COVID virus is escalating in our parish. I think as a public official, being a public official and having been at the state, I'm very concerned that we would have public officials doing that. So for those of you who may know of those who are in the public arena, public servants that's doing this kind of thing, maybe you would have the courtesy to speak with them and let them know that this is something that is really unbecoming of a public official, especially dumping on citizens. These are not public officials. These are people who are in administration. So I just wanted to share that with you, because you'll probably be seeing things that will be coming out later on this. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Commissioner Burrell. Commissioner Vice President Johnson.
Yeah, I just was gonna say that we're kind of getting off task on the agenda. We've already voted on those two items, and we should be on the next item on the agenda. And this should be in the communiques, if there is a communique on the agenda.
Well,
VP,
Mr. Chairman,
Yes, sir, Commissioner Epperson.
I move that we move to executive session.
The chair will second that.
Point of
But
clarification, Mr. Chairman.
Just really quick, I wanted to give Vice President Johnson the opportunity to wrap up his comments. The motion
That
was
was
made,
that was it. That we was actually getting off task of the agenda, and we needed to get back on. I know people had follow-up statements to talk about the two things, but at the same time, that should be in communique.
Point of clarification.
Yes, sir, Commissioner Brill.
Mr. President, that is the reason why I asked you at what point those comments can be made, so it would not interfere with the flow of our meeting. If there was a place, I looked on the agenda and I didn't see anything about communiques on here. That's the reason why, out of respect, I asked you where can that be, because I felt strongly that those comments need to be made.
Commissioner Brill, as a presidential privilege, I wanted to give you that opportunity because this special meeting did not have a communique. And at the end of the day, I think all 12 of us should have the right to at least speak or address our citizens if we want to. So I'm glad you afforded the availability. If that concludes the point of clarification, Commissioner Epperson has a motion on the floor. Mr. Everson, we will roll call vote.
Commissioner Hopkins,
Yes.
Commissioner Johnson,
Yes.
Commissioner Jackson, Commissioner Young,
Yes.
Commissioner Burrell,
Yes.
Commissioner Cawthorn,
Yes.
Commissioner Gage Watts,
Yes.
Commissioner Taliaferro. Commissioner Taliaferro, I didn't hear you if you responded.
I believe you had to step away, Mr. Everson.
Okay.
No, I'm good. Yes.
Okay, Commissioner Atkins,
Yes.
Commissioner Chavez,
Yes.
Commissioner Lazarus,
Yes.
and Commissioner Epperson.
Yes.
Okay, that motion carries with 11 in support and 1 out of the chamber. So if I could, since this is the first time we've done an executive session on with live streaming from Zoom, if I could ask everybody to wait until we can ensure that we have dropped the live feed. It doesn't happen immediately. So if we could just pause until we can verify that we're not live anymore.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes, sir, Commissioner Epperson.
may I also suggest when we drop the live feed and that's confirmed, that we have a roll call of everyone that's on?
And if I could also ask, it would be helpful if somebody could verify. I know obviously the commissioners and the appropriate staff, but if there are people that are to be in this that I don't know, if somebody
will include all commissioners, administrator, assistant administrator, the attorney, assistant attorney,
Commissioner Johnson, you kind of broke up. Was that a motion? I didn't hear the last part of it.
there was an amendment to Commissioner Epperson's who needs to stay in the meeting, and then the administrator, all commissioners, the assistant administrator, the attorney, the assistant attorney, the clerk, and the deputy clerk.
Second.
Chair, okay, thank you, Commissioner Atkins. Mr. Everson, roll call vote, please.